Someone broke in. He's trying to get in. I'm hiding in the bathroom. Please send someone now.
When my wife died in 2009, it felt like something vital had been carved out of me and buried in me. I still remember the sharp sting of antiseptic in that hospital room, the buzz of fluorescent lights, and the way her eyes stared past me, unfocused, even though I was right there holding her hand. She'd been battling a deep, unrelenting mental illness for years. The doctors said they didn't fully understand it, only that it had eaten away at her mind piece by piece. The day she passed, I didn't let go of her hand until it went cold. I leaned close and whispered that I would look after our little girl, Franklin. Franklin was 6 then. She had her mother's blue eyes, bright with curiosity, but there was always something else there, a heaviness I couldn't quite name. Maybe it was grief she was too young to understand. Maybe it was something I didn't want to think about. After the funeral, we moved to a small, quiet house in Montana and tried to piece together a new life. Our routine was fragile but functional. I worked long hours just to keep the bills paid, which meant I needed someone to take care of Franklin during the day. That's how Mary came into our lives. Mary was a 25-year-old college student, kind, soft-spoken, with a gentle smile Franklin warmed up to immediately. She arrived every morning when I left for work and went home in the evenings after I returned. For a while, it felt like things were finally stabilizing. Then the strange things started. They were small at first. One Tuesday night, maybe early Wednesday morning, I'm not sure anymore, I woke at around 2 a.m., my throat dry and scratchy. I reached to my side to check on Franklin, who'd been sleeping in my bed ever since her mother died. She always said it made her feel safe. Her side of the bed was empty. My heart started pounding. I called her name softly. No answer. The bathroom was empty. Panic crept up my spine as I headed toward the bedroom door. That's when Franklin walked in, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Where were you?" I asked, more sharply than I meant to. "I went downstairs," she said in a tiny voice. "I heard Mommy calling me." My blood ran cold. "Franklin," I said as gently as I could, "your mommy isn't here anymore. You can't go wandering around the house alone, okay? It's dangerous." She just nodded, climbed back into bed, and said nothing else. I stayed awake the rest of the night, listening to every creak and groan of the old house, my mind running circles around itself. A few nights later, it happened again. I woke to find the bedroom door slightly open. Franklin was gone. My stomach dropped. I crept downstairs, trying not to make a sound. The house was unnervingly quiet, the kind of silence that seems to press on your eardrums. At the bottom of the stairs, I saw her. Franklin was standing in the hallway with her back to me, speaking to someone I couldn't see. Her small voice floated through the darkness. "Mommy, why can't you come inside?" I stopped breathing. On the wall opposite her was a shadow, a tall, distinctly feminine figure. It didn't flicker like a normal shadow. It just was, still, solid. Wrong. My hand started to shake, and the glass of water I'd been holding slipped from my fingers, shattering on the floor. Franklin spun around at the sound. The shadow vanished instantly. "She was here," Franklin said, accusing now. "It was Mommy, and now she's gone because of you." I had no idea how to respond to that. I just scooped her up, carried her back to bed, and tucked her in. She fell asleep quickly. I didn't sleep at all. I sat on the couch in the living room with every light in the house blazing, a baseball bat clenched in my hands like it would help against whatever I'd just seen. After that, the nights blurred together. Franklin began saying odd things, talking about her mother as if she were still in the house, watching us, listening to us. Mary noticed too. One afternoon, as she was about to leave, she paused at the door. "Franklin's been talking about her mom a lot lately," she said. "It's kind of eerie. Are you okay?" I lied and said everything was fine. What was I supposed to tell her? That my dead wife might be haunting the house? that I wasn't sure if I was losing my mind. No one would have believed me. About a week later, I reached my breaking point. I woke in the middle of the night to the sound of someone crying. It wasn't Franklin. The sound was lower, rawer, almost guttural. My legs felt like they were made of concrete as I forced myself out of bed and followed the noise to the front door. She was standing there, my wife. She wore the same hospital gown she died in. Her hair was tangled and filthy, hanging in clumps. Her eyes were sunken, hollow pits. Her lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear. The room tilted and spun. I stumbled backward and hit the floor hard as everything went black. When I woke, it was morning. The house was silent. Franklin was still asleep upstairs like nothing had ever happened, but I knew something had. And I knew we couldn't stay there. Whatever was happening wasn't just in my head. It was real, and I couldn't let it wrap its claws around my daughter. We sold the house and moved to Los Angeles. Starting over in a new city was brutal, but I didn't see another option. I never told Franklin the real reason we left. As she grew older, she seemed to forget the things she'd seen and heard in that Montana house, but I never did. For most of 2015, I was in a relationship with a boy named Enrique. We met at school. We were both in 10th grade. It was a toxic relationship from the start. He was controlling, manipulative, and eventually straight up abusive. I tried breaking up with him more times than I can count, but he always found a way to blackmail me into staying. I felt trapped. My dad ended it for me in the end. I don't know exactly what he said or did, but he must have scared Enrique worse than any horror movie, because after that, we were officially done. At least, that's what I thought. It didn't stop him from tormenting me at school. He would sit in class and just stare at me. He'd follow me between periods, tailing me almost everywhere I went for a week, maybe a week and a half after the breakup. Finally, I decided I needed help. I told my friends what was going on, and they stepped up in a big way. 3 or 4 of them started walking with me everywhere, between classes, to the restroom, even out to the parking lot. It helped for a while. One Friday night, I went to my friend Mary's house for a sleepover. We ordered pizza, watched a movie, and gossiped about people from school. It felt normal, safe. Around 12:30 a.m., we headed upstairs to her bedroom to sleep. I was going to share her bed because the other rooms weren't options. The guest room was under reconstruction. Her parents' room was off limits, and they were out of town all week. And her twin brother was at a friend's house that same night. I got into my pajamas, brushed my teeth, turned off the light, and closed Mary's bedroom door. The split second the door clicked shut, we heard the sound of glass shattering downstairs, a window breaking. Before either of us could react, a voice called up from below. "I know you're here, sure. You thought you could hide from me, but you're wrong." I knew that voice instantly. Enrique. How did he even know I was at Mary's? All the blinds in her house were down. Had he followed us? We didn't waste time trying to figure it out. We bolted into the closet next to Mary's bed. Inside, we found a large drawer with enough space behind it for both of us to squeeze in and hide. We crouched there in the dark, barely breathing. We heard Enrique moving through the house, opening a door every 15 to 20 seconds, probably checking each room one by one. Then his heavy footsteps started up the stairs. The first door he opened was Mary's room. There was no lock on it. You know how sometimes the worst possible words just slip out of your mouth at the worst possible time? That's what happened next. From inside the closet, we heard Enrique sneeze. Without thinking, without any sense of self-preservation at all, I whispered, "Bless you." He immediately answered, "Thank you." My blood turned to ice. I silently mouthed, "Oh shit." Footsteps came straight toward the closet. The door swung open. There was no hiding anymore. I stepped out to face him. Mary took off running. Enrique lunged, trying to grab me, but I reacted on instinct. I kicked him as hard as I could in the groin. He dropped to his knees, groaning. I followed it with a punch straight to his nose. His whole body hit the floor. My hand stung, but I didn't stop to think about it. I bolted out of the room, down the stairs, and out the front door. Outside, I saw Mary already on her neighbor's porch, frantically jabbing the doorbell over and over. By the time I reached her, an older woman had opened the door, alarm written all over her face. "What's wrong?" she asked. "My ex-boyfriend broke into Mary's house to get to me," I blurted. "I fought him off, but he's still inside." She ushered us in immediately. Mary pulled out her phone, which she thankfully had in her pocket the whole time, and called the police. They arrived in under 8 minutes. The officers went through Mary's house, but Enrique was gone. Vanished. We thanked them, and I told one officer I'd come down to the station the next day to file a formal report. He agreed. I went back into Mary's house, packed my things with shaking hands, and called my mom. She was still awake, thankfully. I asked her to come pick me up and explained what had happened. She arrived about 15 minutes later. As soon as I got home, I went straight to bed. The next morning, my mom and I went to the police station. I gave a full statement, every detail I could remember. Weeks passed, and eventually I was granted a 5-year restraining order against Enrique. He wasn't allowed within 300 feet of me. When those 5 years finally ended, he still never tried to contact me again. I had him blocked on everything, and as far as I know, he's moved on. And that's the best possible outcome. Before the next story starts, if you're new here and like these kinds of true scary experiences, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. I used to be a police officer in Seattle, Washington. If I'm honest, I never loved the job. It wasn't something I dreamed of as a kid. I ended up on the force because life didn't go the way I planned. I didn't get into any of the colleges I wanted. With my background in high school sports and my obsession with staying in shape, becoming a cop felt like a practical backup plan. Most days blurred together. The calls were repetitive, the routes familiar. It all felt like a loop, until one day in October 2019. It was during the early days of the coronavirus outbreak when it felt like the world was tilting off its axis. I was sitting in my patrol car on a quiet stretch of road when a call came over dispatch. A man with a hammer was screaming and swinging it at another man in a nearby park. Civilians had tried to step in but couldn't stop him. I was close, so I decided to respond. As I drove toward the park, updates crackled through the radio. The suspect had moved into an alley near the park and was now wielding a flaming stick. It sounded bizarre. My gut tightened. I slowed as I turned into the area, scanning the alley, pulse hammering in my ears. The unpredictability of it all had me on edge. Then I saw him. He stepped out from a corner, holding a long stick with fire licking at one end. From a safe distance, I opened my door and called out, "Seattle Police Department, stop where you are." My voice bounced off the brick walls. He didn't stop. Instead, he yelled a string of curses back at me and kept moving. What happened next is a chain of mistakes I still replay in my head. I eased my patrol car forward, forgetting to shut my door in my rush to keep him in sight. I shouted at him again to stop. He suddenly turned and sprinted straight toward my vehicle. The flaming stick bobbed wildly in his hand, sparks flying. Before I could react, he was at my door. He hurled the burning stick into the car through the open doorway. Panic surged through me. I scrambled across the seat toward the passenger side, drawing my gun as I went. I fired several shots in his direction, but in my rush and the chaos, every bullet missed. In the confusion, I also forgot to hit the brakes. The car started rolling backward. I lost my balance, toppled out of the open door, and crashed onto the pavement. Pain exploded in my left leg and both hands, but adrenaline shoved it into the background. I grabbed my radio and shouted, "Shots fired. I need medical assistance." My voice was shaking. When I looked up, my patrol car was beginning to catch fire from the inside. The flames spread quickly. I stumbled away to a safe distance and just waited, chest heaving, heart thudding painfully. Sirens grew louder until backup finally arrived. Other officers managed to corner the man and bring him down with a taser. Relief washed over me so fast it made me dizzy. The threat was over. Medics checked me out and took me to a nearby medical center. I was lucky, just scrapes and bruises on my leg and hands. They patched me up and I was discharged later that night. At the hospital, I learned the man's name, Brian Joseph L. He was charged with assault and held in custody, awaiting trial. No one could tell me exactly what had started the fight between him and the other man in the park, but nothing could justify what he'd done, swinging a hammer, setting fires, attacking a patrol car. I felt sure justice would catch up with him. In the days that followed, I was put on administrative leave while the department reviewed the incident. The forced time off gave me space I hadn't had before to really think. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I'd never truly wanted this life. The job had never been a calling for me, just a fallback. A week later, I resigned. It was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made, but also one of the clearest. I enrolled at a community college and eventually earned an associate's degree in communications, a field I actually cared about. I found a job that felt rewarding in ways police work never had. That incident with L is just a memory now, but it still surfaces sometimes, usually at night when the world is quiet. I'll find myself back in that moment, trapped in my burning patrol car with fire at my heels, wondering what might have happened if one small thing had gone differently. If I'd closed my door, if I'd kept more distance, if I'd handled it another way. But life doesn't hand you do-overs, only lessons. That day taught me a lot about my limits, my choices, and what I actually want out of my life. I've closed that chapter, but the lesson stays with me. I'm a man in my 40s, married, no kids. Because of our jobs, my wife and I move roughly every 2 years. We're constantly being transferred or sent on long assignments, so we've lived in more apartments than I can easily remember. Most of our neighbors over the years have been tolerable, some even friendly. But the neighbors I'm about to talk about made me question our entire lifestyle. It was early February 2020 when my wife and I moved into a new apartment in Farmington, New Mexico. A few days after settling in, we met the family next door, a married couple, Olivia and Humberto, and their 2 daughters. At first glance, they seemed normal enough, polite, easy to talk to, but I got a strange vibe from Humberto. Nothing concrete, just a feeling that something about him was off. Weeks went by without incident. Whenever we saw our neighbors, we'd exchange smiles and waves, but never deep conversations. Then late March rolled around, and the coronavirus lockdowns began. Every so often, we'd hear yelling through the shared wall. It was clearly Humberto. His voice was deep and booming. I couldn't make out the words, just the tone, anger, frustration, maybe desperation. I told myself he was probably just stressed about the lockdown. None of us could go anywhere, see family, or live normally. I even felt a bit bad for them. But the yelling was loud enough that we could hear it clearly in our own apartment. In April, my wife showed me a text from Olivia. It said they were going to stay temporarily at her mother's house on the other side of the state. I hate to say it, but we felt a wave of relief. No more shouting through the wall, just peace and quiet. They came back in October. That's when things took a darker turn. One night around 3 a.m., my wife and I were jolted awake by loud, relentless knocking at our front door. Not just a polite knock, pounding. Nobody decent shows up unannounced at 3 in the morning. I had a strong suspicion it was Humberto. I went to the closet, took out my handgun, and my wife told me to calm down. I just want this person to understand it's not okay to pound on our door in the middle of the night, I told her. She didn't argue. She just watched me leave the bedroom. I checked the peephole. Sure enough, Humberto. I took a deep breath, opened the door partway, and asked, "What the hell are you doing?" He looked strangely calm. "Oh, I think you left your wallet outside my door," he said. My wallet was in our bedroom where I kept it every night. I knew he was lying. "Are you high right now?" I asked. "No, I'm not lying," he insisted. "Your wallet was at our door." I raised my hand so he could clearly see the gun. His eyes widened and he stepped back. "Go back to your apartment," I said, keeping my voice as even as I could, "before I do something you do not want to know about." He backed away and disappeared into his place. I shut the door, put the gun back in the closet, and returned to bed. "What did you do?" my wife asked. "I gave Humberto a firm warning," I said. She nodded and turned off her lamp. The room sank into darkness. I lay awake for nearly an hour and a half before sleep finally came. Nothing else happened that month. In mid-November, my wife and I left on a business trip to another state in the region. We were gone for nearly 3 weeks. It felt good to be away from that building and from Humberto. We came back around the last week of November or maybe the first week of December. I'm not exactly sure. One day, my wife headed out to go shopping. A few seconds after our door closed, I heard shouting in the hallway, "Humberto." I rushed out and saw him yelling at my wife. She looked frightened. "Leave her alone," I snapped. "If you keep bothering us, you'll find out what happens next." He held his hands up like a soldier surrendering and walked straight back into his apartment without another word. I turned to my wife. "What was he yelling at you for?" "I don't know," she said. "Maybe he was just seeing or hearing things." I shook my head. "Next time you see him, just stay calm, don't panic, and don't engage." She nodded, then went on with her shopping trip. I realized we never saw Olivia or the daughters during any of this. They were always out of sight, like they were hiding from him, or like they didn't care. Either way, it made me uneasy. I started seriously considering moving again and possibly getting a restraining order, but I decided to see how the rest of the year played out. When Christmas week arrived, my wife and I left to spend the holidays at my parents' house. We needed distance from that place. We didn't feel safe there anymore. January came, and for a while, it seemed like things were cooling down. I was wrong. Near the end of January, on a Sunday evening as it was getting dark, my wife and I were on the couch watching TV when we heard brutal, heavy kicks against our front door. We didn't even have to guess who it was. The blows shook the frame. It sounded like someone trying to break the door down. The door was locked, but after about 4 more kicks, the frame gave way and the door flew inward. Humberto stormed into our apartment with a gun in his hand. We jumped up, hearts pounding. The sight of the gun drained every bit of warmth from the room. He started yelling wild accusations, claiming we'd been harassing him, threatening his family. None of it was true. We'd barely spoken to them the entire time we'd lived there. I was stunned. "What is wrong with you? Are you high or drunk right now?" He ignored the question. "You ruined my life," he shouted. "You ruined everything." I tried to keep my voice steady. "Put the gun down and calm down." "I'm going to kill you both," he snarled. His eyes were bloodshot with pure rage. That's when Olivia and the daughters finally appeared, stepping into the hallway. Their timing couldn't have been worse. They tried to pull him back, but they couldn't control him. We didn't wait to see what he'd do next. We bolted out of the apartment. As soon as we were in the hallway, he started shooting at us. I heard the gunshots and felt the rush of air as the bullets missed. Somehow, none of them hit us. We kept running, all the way outside, and didn't stop until we were too out of breath to continue. The police arrived quickly. Once they got there, I felt safe enough to go back toward the building with them. One of the apartment windows was shattered. Officers stood outside with guns drawn, shouting for Humberto to come out with his hands up. He refused. His daughters shouted at him to calm down, to listen to the police. Olivia was near tears, yelling, "Don't shoot him. He has mental health issues." I knew it. I'd always suspected he wasn't stable. The officers kept trying to reason with him, but he barricaded himself inside and got more violent. He broke another window. Glass rained down onto the pavement. One officer radioed for more units. Then we saw it. Humberto threw a lit Molotov cocktail from inside the building. Everyone scrambled back as it crashed to the ground and caught fire. The police opened fire. He tossed another flaming bottle and more shots rang out. I saw 2 bullets hit his right arm. He collapsed moments later. The officers rushed in, handcuffed him, and dragged him out to a patrol car. Meanwhile, the fire from the Molotovs was starting to spread. My wife grabbed buckets of water and doused the flames until they were out. Thankfully, no one else was injured, and the fire never reached the apartment building itself. I walked over to where his family stood and, in a harsh tone, told them they'd let things get this far, that they'd lost control of him and allowed him to cross every possible line. They tried to explain, to defend themselves, but I wasn't interested in hearing it. I went back inside with my wife trailing behind me. "Pack your bags," I told her. "Why?" she asked, though I think she already knew. "We're staying at a motel for a few nights. We're not spending another night here." She didn't argue. Before we left, we went to the police station and gave a full statement about everything Humberto had done over the past months. The investigators asked if we wanted to press charges. I said I wouldn't, on one condition: that Humberto and his family paid for all the damages to our apartment and the building. After we finished at the station, my wife and I checked into a motel and stayed there for 3 nights. When we returned, we told Olivia and the girls that we wouldn't press charges and that we'd even bail Humberto out if they covered the damage costs. Olivia agreed. We moved out 2 weeks later. That place had become tainted for us. We couldn't live there anymore. I don't know what Humberto and his family are doing now. I just hope he's getting the help he needs and that he stays out of trouble. I never planned to spend a Friday night in an old cemetery, but that's exactly where I ended up. My friends dared me to do it. They teased me relentlessly, calling me scared and weak until my pride gave in. I agreed to stay there until midnight, even though dread twisted in my gut. "It's just a cemetery," I told myself as I forced a shaky grin. "What's the worst that could happen?" The cemetery sat on the edge of town, surrounded by a tall iron fence. When I pushed open the gate, the hinges let out a long, mournful creak, like a warning I shouldn't ignore. My friends stayed safely across the street on the sidewalk. They shouted half-hearted encouragement and dumb jokes, but I could hear the unease in their voices. None of them had the guts to actually take the dare. The weak beam from my flashlight slid over leaning tombstones and skeletal trees. The place was old, really old. Some gravestones tilted at impossible angles, cracked down the middle. Others were nearly swallowed by moss. The air smelled damp and rotten, heavy with decay. Every step I took felt too loud, the sound amplified by the suffocating silence. It was like the ground itself wanted everyone to know I didn't belong there. I tried to distract myself by thinking about normal things, homework, songs stuck in my head, but I couldn't ignore the way the shadows moved. The branches of the bare trees cast thin, bony shapes that looked almost alive in my peripheral vision, stretching toward me in ways that didn't quite make sense. About half an hour in, I realized I'd been wandering aimlessly, weaving between rows of headstones. I paused to shine my flashlight on a few inscriptions, but most of the words were worn away, erased by time and weather. A small stone shifted under my shoe and rolled, clacking loudly into the darkness. My heart leaped into my throat. For a second, I thought I heard something else in the distance, a low moan, or maybe it was just the wind. I told myself I was imagining things, but the prickling sensation of being watched wouldn't leave. Eventually, I found a stone bench near a large marble tomb and sat down. My phone said 11:30 p.m., 30 minutes to go. Each minute dragged by. Ordinary nighttime sounds, rustling leaves, the creak of branches, felt sinister. Every faint noise sent a jolt through my body. Under the wide, uncaring sky, I felt impossibly small. Then I heard it, a sharp crunch behind me. The hair on my neck stood up. I whipped around, swinging the flashlight in an arc. Nothing. Just tombstones and twisted trees. Still, the feeling of not being alone clung to me like a second skin. My pulse sped up. Every ghost story I'd ever heard flooded back into my head all at once. A few more minutes crawled by. Then the air changed. The wind died suddenly. The faint sounds of town in the distance, the occasional car, the hum of life faded out. A thick, unnatural stillness settled over everything. My flashlight beam shook in my trembling hand. That's when I saw it. At the far edge of the cemetery, a figure stood motionless. Tall, indistinct, just barely outlined by the thin wash of moonlight. "Hello," I called, my voice cracking. "Is anyone there?" The figure didn't respond, didn't move. I told myself it was a statue, or a trick of the light. Then it shifted. Its head turned toward me, and it vanished. Not like something stepping behind a tree, but like smoke dissolving into the air. A full-body shiver ran through me. My phone buzzed and I almost dropped it. It was a text from my friends. "You good?" I typed back, fingers clumsy. "Yeah, still here, but I wasn't good." My nerves were shredded. My courage was hanging by a thread. Still, the idea of quitting and getting mocked for weeks was somehow worse than staying. At 11:50 p.m., I decided to move closer to the gate. Being near the exit felt like a fair compromise. As I walked, the rotten smell intensified, thick and nauseating. My flashlight started flickering, the beam sputtering like a dying candle. Shapes shifted at the edges of my vision, but every time I turned, there was nothing. I finally spotted the gate ahead and felt a surge of relief until I saw it. Another figure stood near the entrance. This one was hunched, wrapped in shadow. It was as if the darkness itself clung to it, refusing to let the light touch its shape. My flashlight flickered again, then steadied. I forced myself to keep moving. As I got closer, the figure straightened. It grew taller, its silhouette stretching unnaturally. A dry, rasping sound came from it, a sound like laughter stripped of anything human. My flashlight died. Instant, crushing darkness swallowed everything. My hands fumbled for my phone. In my panic, I dropped it. I heard the crack as it hit a stone and the light went out. I was blind. Something cold brushed against my shoulder, light skeletal like bony fingers. My breath caught. I spun around, arms flailing, but touched only empty air. Then a whisper slid right against my ear. The words were in some language I didn't understand, but the venom in them needed no translation. Adrenaline tore through me. Whatever had held me frozen snapped. I ran. I stumbled over uneven ground, tripping and falling, tearing my hands and knees on rock and gravel. I didn't care. I scrambled up and kept going, lungs burning, heart slamming. At last my hands slammed against cold iron. The gate. I shoved it open, burst through, and collapsed on the sidewalk, gulping air. My friends rushed toward me, their earlier bravado gone. Their faces were pale. "What happened? Are you okay?" I couldn't answer. My whole body was shaking. The smell of rot and decay still clung to me, thick and suffocating. I just climbed into the backseat of the car when they opened the door. No jokes, no more dares. They could see in my face that whatever happened in there wasn't something to laugh about. I still can't fully wrap my head around what happened to me just yesterday. It started as one of the best nights of my life. I got to see the New York Rangers play at Madison Square Garden by myself. I've never been the type of guy with a big friend circle, and the few friends I do have don't follow hockey with the same obsession I do. But I didn't care. Being there in person to watch the Rangers on home ice was enough. I showed up at MSG buzzing with excitement, wearing my favorite Rangers jersey, determined to soak in every second. The energy inside the arena was unreal. It was only a Tuesday night, but the place felt electric, blue, red, and white jerseys everywhere. When the opening face-off dropped, the whole building came alive. On my left was a family of 4 in matching Rangers hats. On my right were 2 guys around my age. They didn't sound like they were from New York, but they were clearly hardcore Rangers fans. We started talking, trading opinions about players and making score predictions. In that environment, it didn't take long to feel like we'd known each other for years. Sports can do that. During the second period, a fight broke out on the ice. Gloves dropped, fists flew, and the crowd lost its mind. Everyone stood up cheering. I couldn't deny it, I was loving it. There's a rush that comes with seeing that level of raw intensity, even though I hoped no one got seriously hurt. When the referees finally pulled the players apart, the arena erupted with cheers before settling back down for the next face-off. We all high-fived and reset, still grinning. The game stayed hard-fought until the final horn. The Rangers won just like I'd hoped. The entire place exploded. Strangers were hugging, clapping, chanting. It felt like being part of something much bigger than yourself. On the way out, Thousands of us began singing the chorus to Seven Nation Army in the halls, our voices echoing through Madison Square Garden. It was one of those moments you never forget. Outside, the crowd slowly thinned as people headed for their cars, trains, or nearby bars. I'd driven in from New Jersey and had parked in a garage about 6 or 7 blocks from the garden. I wanted to avoid the worst of the traffic on 34th Street, so I cut over to some of the quieter side streets. I remember thinking how perfectly the night had gone. No ticket trouble, friendly fans, a solid Rangers win, and even a good old-fashioned on-ice brawl. I had no idea how fast everything was about to turn. Those blocks felt weirdly empty. The neon lights still glowed and I could hear distant engines and city noise, but right where I was walking, there was nobody. No other pedestrians. No cabs slowing down. No background chatter. New York is rarely that quiet. It unsettled me, but I brushed it off as leftover adrenaline from the game. I kept my head down, just focused on getting to my car so I could post about the win once I was safely inside with my phone out. Then something wrapped around my head, a towel. For a split second, I was just confused. Then a massive force slammed into my back and drove me face first into the pavement. The impact knocked the air out of me. Before I could react, I felt multiple pairs of feet, at least 4, kicking me. My ribs, my stomach, the side of my head, over and over. Blows came from every angle, dull and brutal. I could hear myself grunting, gasping, maybe even screaming, but the towel muffled everything. It probably lasted about 15 seconds, but when you're being kicked and can't fight back, 15 seconds stretches into forever. Then suddenly it stopped. My body throbbed with pain. I could barely move. I lay there pressed against the cold concrete, trying to hold onto consciousness. Hands dug into my pockets, yanking out my phone, my wallet, and my car keys. I heard men talking in rushed Spanish above me. One of them sounded like he had a Venezuelan accent. Their tones were urgent and businesslike. A moment later, their footsteps pounded away into the darkness. I stayed still for a few more seconds, terrified they might come back. When I was sure they were gone, I forced myself to move. The pain in my ribs made every breath feel like fire. I pushed myself onto my side, then slowly, carefully, managed to stand. My balance was shot. I hunched forward and hobbled along the sidewalk, every step sending a fresh wave of pain through my body. After maybe 50 feet, I saw something I hadn't noticed in years, a payphone. I've never been so grateful for an outdated piece of technology. With shaking hands, I picked up the receiver and dialed 911. My voice trembled as I explained that I'd been jumped and robbed of my phone, wallet, and car keys. To my surprise, the police arrived in about 2 minutes. They helped me into the back of their car and asked if I was okay. Physically, I wasn't, but I was conscious, coherent, and alive. I told them what I could about the attackers, the Spanish, the Venezuelan accent, the number of men. It was all jumbled from the shock. They drove me to a nearby hospital about 5 minutes away. After some x-rays and exams, the doctors determined nothing was broken, just severe bruising and a likely concussion. They gave me pain medication and ice packs for the swelling on my face and torso. Once I had a moment to collect myself, I borrowed a phone at the nurse's station and called the parking garage where my car was. I explained that my keys had been stolen and that I'd need my car towed since it was useless to me for the time being. The hospital kept me overnight for observation. I barely slept. By morning, I checked out and took the bus from Port Authority back to New Jersey, limping the whole way. When I got home, I logged into my bank accounts on my computer and felt my stomach drop. There were new charges on my credit cards. They hadn't wasted any time. I immediately called the credit card companies to cancel everything. As I did, the reality sank in. I'd lost my phone, my wallet, my keys, my sense of safety, all in one random, vicious attack. The bruises still ache as I write this, but I'm grateful for one thing above all. I'm alive. It could have been so much worse. My car is still in that parking garage, waiting for me to figure out what to do next. I'm angry, I feel violated. All that for some cash and a few cards. But no amount of money is worth more than my life. I'm trying to focus on that as I move forward. I recently quit being a full-time police officer because of one specific incident that still haunts me, no matter how hard I try to push it away. It happened in March 2021, during the day while I was on duty. I was in line at a restaurant drive-thru in my patrol car when I recognized someone getting into a red car ahead of me. He was climbing into the passenger seat. His name was Dennis Gilder Jr., and there was a warrant out for his arrest. The driver pulled away and I followed. After about 30 seconds to a minute, I flipped on my lights and siren. The car pulled over. Another officer was with me. We both stepped out. He went to the driver's side and I approached the passenger side. The windows on Dennis's side were rolled down a bit. A woman sat behind the wheel. "I hate to be the one to tell you this," I said to Dennis, "but it looks like you've got a warrant out of Illinois." I asked for his ID. He said he didn't have it on him. "Step out of the vehicle so I can identify you," I told him. He didn't move. I asked again and again, 4 or 5 times in total. Each time he ignored me. I tried to stay respectful, but my patience was wearing thin. Then, without warning, he rolled his window up the rest of the way, shoved the woman out of the driver's seat, and climbed over into her spot. The woman tried to get back in the car, like she knew something bad was about to happen, but he pushed her away. I stepped in front of the car and shouted at him to stop and get out. I was no longer calm. The other officer reached into the car to stop him as well, but Dennis slammed the car into gear. He started driving. I jumped up onto the hood, crouching low and drawing my gun, aiming it at Dennis through the windshield. I was yelling at him to stop. For about 20 seconds, he drove slowly. I held on, hoping he'd come to his senses. He didn't. He accelerated. We were soon going 40 to 50 miles per hour. Fear like I'd never known before grabbed hold of me. I scrambled from the hood onto the roof, clinging to whatever I could. The wind buffeted me, and at some point, my weapon flew out of my hand onto the road. One of my shoes also flew off. Up ahead, a train was moving along the tracks, blocking a straight path. Dennis made a sharp left. We were heading toward a construction zone. I saw a deep ditch ahead. The car hit a bump and I lost my grip. I was thrown off the roof and slammed onto my back. Pain exploded in my lower spine. The patrol car behind us screeched to a halt only seconds after I hit the ground. Dennis kept going. The red car disappeared from sight. I couldn't move. The pain was excruciating. I'd broken the vertebrae in my lower back. The other officer called for medical help. An ambulance arrived within minutes and rushed me to the hospital. I spent hours there being evaluated and treated. Eventually, the sheriff and several coworkers came to check on me. I was lucky to be alive. The sheriff told me what happened next. Dennis managed to drive about another mile before the red car broke down. He abandoned it, then stole another vehicle from someone's garage. And yes, he'd stolen the red car too. It wasn't his. He was caught and arrested shortly after. The woman he'd pushed out of the car was unharmed and safely returned home. A year later, Dennis was found guilty. The following year, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. I was able to return to work 3 months after the incident, but the mental scars stayed. I continued working until the end of 2024, when I finally resigned. I just couldn't shake the memory of clinging to the roof of a speeding car, convinced each second might be my last. It took me a full year to physically recover from the broken vertebrae. Even now, I'm careful anytime I lift or exert myself. I don't want to risk injuring my back again. Dennis eventually apologized to me. I forgave him. When he gets out, I genuinely hope he turns his life around and never puts anyone, especially himself, in that kind of situation again. Last Wednesday night, I was heading home to New Jersey after spending the evening in New York City at a Knicks game in Madison Square Garden. The game was exciting, and I was thrilled just to be there in person. After it ended, I walked out of MSG and made my way to Penn Station. My plan was simple: take the one train one stop to Times Square, then walk to the Port Authority bus terminal and catch my bus home. I got on the train, rode the single stop, and got off at Times Square. The ride was uneventful. When I walked into Port Authority, though, something felt wrong. It was almost completely empty. Normally, you'll see at least a few commuters, late-night stragglers, or security staff. But that night, I didn't see a single person. The silence inside that huge terminal felt eerie. As I walked, I was suddenly hit from behind by a huge, violent shove. I went down hard, face first onto the floor. Before I could get my hands under me or try to stand, I felt 3 different sets of feet kicking me. My back, my stomach, my head. All at once. The attack probably lasted around 15 seconds, but in that moment it felt endless. I couldn't fight back. All I could do was curl up, trying to protect my face and torso. Then, just as quickly as it started, it stopped. Someone yanked my wallet out of my pocket. I lay there, stunned and helpless, as the 3 attackers ran off. In a matter of seconds, the $300 I'd had in my wallet was gone. I was furious and sick to my stomach at the same time. But as I lay there, one thought cut through the anger: my phone. I reached into my jacket pocket with shaking hands. Somehow, miraculously, it was still there. I remembered that pressing the power button 5 times quickly would automatically call 911. I did exactly that, and the call went through. My breathing was ragged. I told the operator I'd been attacked and robbed. The dispatcher stayed calm and told me help was on the way. Still lying on the floor, I turned my head to the right and noticed something on the ground: a pocket knife. One of them must have dropped it. A cold wave washed through me as I realized how much worse it could have been. If they decided to use the knife instead of just their feet, in under 5 minutes, police and EMTs arrived. They checked me over, then put me on a stretcher and took me to the hospital. I gave my statement there to the officers and investigators. Most of my injuries were bruises, painful, but nothing broken. I stayed overnight for treatment and observation. The next day, they discharged me and I went home, still sore and shaken. Losing $300 hurts. For me, that's a lot of money. But my life is worth far more than any amount of cash. I'm grateful they didn't stab me with that knife. Grateful I can still walk, talk, and tell this story. The police are still investigating. I've spoken to them several times by phone, but so far there haven't been any arrests. I don't know if those 3 will ever be caught. If they are, I will absolutely press charges. They also had my credit cards, and I'm sure they used them for whatever they wanted. But that part, while infuriating, isn't as terrifying as the attack itself. What matters most to me is that I made it out alive. Getting robbed like that was one of the scariest experiences of my life. It's not something I ever want to relive. If there's anything I've learned, it's that your life can change in an instant. You have to stay aware of your surroundings, especially late at night. I'm just thankful I'm still here to tell you what happened.